This Washington, D.C. travel guide will provide informative suggestions for those planning their trip to the National Capital Region. This video shares my top Washington, D.C. area attractions and activities that I recommend travelers consider. After living in Alexandria, Virginia for a year, Washington, D.C. became one of my favorite places. My family and I visit almost every year. I will not extensively discuss D.C.'s most popular tourist attractions. Instead, I will describe my top recommendations, some of which you might not have thought of. Washington, D.C. is packed with iconic landmarks, destination-worthy free museums, exquisite historic neighborhoods, an abundance of recreation options, along with festivals and events all year long. Common sites for tourists to visit are as follows: the White House, the 1.9 miles long National Mall, which encompasses the Lincoln Memorial, Washington Monument, Smithsonian Museums, the Capitol Building, and several incredible memorials. The Tidal Basin, where you can see the Jefferson, Roosevelt, and King memorials, along with Arlington Cemetery and the Changing of the Guard. I do propose that most of those sites be at least a full day on your United States' capital itinerary. I will end this video with a list of additional sites worth considering. If you only want to hear about a specific spot, the sites with their timestamps are annotated as chapters in this video's description. If you have experience or insight into any of these destinations, please share your knowledge in the comments so planners get another perspective and more information. Please consider supporting this channel by subscribing, and for new video alerts, turn on the notification bell. If you're interested, this information is also on my website at travelguidesfromkris.com, and there is a link to my Washington, D.C. blog in the description of this video. The District of Columbia is the nation's 6th largest metropolitan area and is nestled in between Virginia and Maryland. It is divided from Virginia by the Potomac River and shares a land border with Maryland to the north and east. Some major cities in the D.C. metropolitan area are Alexandria, Arlington, Silver Spring, and Bethesda, all of which have stops on the D.C. Metro Rail system. Parking is free on the weekends and on holidays at the Washington Metros. Traveling around the city is easier using the Metro Rail trains. My first recommendation is Theodore Roosevelt Island National Memorial. The island is an 88-acre park dedicated to the United States' 26th president. Theodore Roosevelt was a naturalist, writer, and sportsman who has been considered the conservation president. During his presidency from 1901 to 1909, he signed legislation creating 5 national parks and signed into law what is known as the Antiquities Act. This allowed him to establish 18 national monuments. The Theodore Roosevelt Island National Memorial's Plaza is a 5-minute walk after entering the island and features a 17-foot bronze statue of the president giving a speech. The open area is paved with granite, is bordered by 2 fountains, and is surrounded by 4 21-foot granite tablets inscribed with excerpts from Roosevelt's writings. The design is from architect Eric Googler, the same person responsible for the Oval Office among other significant works. The island is an outstanding destination to enjoy a nature walk among native hardwood trees and cattail marshes. There are 2.5 miles of trails with multiple paths, some of which are dirt and occasionally muddy. The 1.5-mile swamp trail is partly on boardwalk as well as pea gravel. Dogs on a leash are allowed. The forested island sits on the Potomac River across from the colonial port town of Georgetown and the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. It is reached from Rosslyn, Virginia via a footbridge and is about a half-hour metro ride or walk from the National Mall and a 30-minute walk from Arlington National Cemetery. The Theodore Roosevelt Island National Memorial includes a parking lot, but get there early on the weekends because spaces are limited. My second recommendation is George Washington's Mount Vernon, our country's most important historic home. Situated along the Potomac River, 15 miles downstream from Washington, D.C., are the home and gardens of George and Martha Washington. George Washington was one of our nation's founding fathers, who was unanimously elected the United States' first president after successfully serving as the commander of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. George Washington was the only president to not live in the White House since it wasn't completed until 1800. Instead, Mount Vernon was his primary residence. George Washington came from a prominent family and inherited some of his family's fortune as early as age 11, and then Mount Vernon and more fortune in his early 20s. In addition, he was 26 years old when he married Martha, a wealthy widow. The Mount Vernon estate was purchased, preserved, and saved for future generations by a group of patriotic women named the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, founded in 1853. George Washington's Mount Vernon is an 8,000 acres former plantation that includes a mansion, 4 gardens, several outbuildings, along with family and enslaved burials to include George and Martha's burial tombs. The estate is also comprised of 23 galleries and theaters in their museum and education center. While touring the estate and museum, you will see many artifacts to include George Washington's dentures, chamber pot, and the original 4-poster bed where he passed away from a throat infection. The plantation incorporates a working animal farm with rare breeds that were present during Washington's time. You can visit original and reconstructed 18th century buildings to include the blacksmith shop as well as slave quarters. And from April through October, there are agriculture 18th century reenactments on the 4-acre farm. Mount Vernon's east lawn has a striking view of the Potomac River and opportunities to rest while soaking in the scenic landscape. For 10 miles along the shoreline, George Washington ran 3 fisheries. From April through October, tours are offered for George Washington's distillery and grits mill. The distillery was one of America's largest in 1799 and produced 11,000 gallons of whiskey. The grits mill could produce 5,000 to 8,000 pounds of flour and cornmeal a day. Available for purchase are the distilled spirits, cornmeal, flour, and grits produced at the estate. Mount Vernon includes a food court, as well as the Mount Vernon Inn restaurant. The inn features traditional American dishes served during the 18th century and staff dress in period costumes. Reservations are not required, but are recommended, and you don't need a ticket to Mount Vernon to dine. The Mount Vernon estate is about a 30-minute drive from the National Mall along the scenic George Washington Memorial Parkway. There are also bus options that connect at the Huntington Metro Station. If you're interested in bicycling, the Mount Vernon Trail runs 18 miles from Roosevelt Island to George Washington's home. This gorgeous trail runs parallel to the Potomac River and passes several enjoyable parks to include Lady Bird Johnson and Belle Haven parks. It also features many picturesque views like that of the Washington Monument and the Woodrow Wilson Bridge that includes a pedestrian trail towards National Harbor. The Mount Vernon Trail even goes through Old Town Alexandria via Union Street. There are several bike rental options available in the DC metro area. My next recommendation is Alexandria's Colonial Historic Center, Old Town. Old Town is a beautiful area filled with cobblestone roads, brick sidewalks, and centuries-old homes and buildings. The historic seaport town is worth visiting on foot, or at the very least, a ride on the free trolley. King Street is the town's heart as a walkable mile that is lined with excellent restaurants, bars, boutiques, and cafes. Old Town Alexandria has a lot of historic sites to explore, and several are associated with George Washington. The city of Alexandria was founded in 1749 by Scottish merchants and was named in honor of landowner and fellow Scotsman John Alexander. You can arrive at King Street via Metro or Alexandria's free bus, the Dash, which travels down King Street. The King Street trolley is free and arrives at stops every 15 minutes. The trolley takes the 1 mile from the Metro station and ends at the historic City Hall in Market Square, which is across the street from the Visitor Center. The waterfront is 4 blocks from the trolley's last stop. An interesting destination in Old Town is Gatsby's Tavern. The National Historic Landmark has been serving guests since 1770 and includes a museum, restaurant, and bar. Some of the tavern's famous guests include George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, among other consequential local dignitaries that John Gatsby invited to his establishment. George Washington attended 2 of his birthnight balls at the tavern. If you arrive to Old Town using the Metro, one of the first things you will notice is the imposing George Washington Masonic Temple, which was dedicated to the first president, a Freemason. The George Washington Masonic National Memorial began construction in 1922, opened to the public in 1970, was designated as a National Historic Monument in 2015, and is a National Center of Freemasonry. Tours to the museum are offered on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays with an advance reservation. The Old Town Farmers Market is the nation's longest continuously running farmers market and is held every Saturday morning in the market square. The Freedom House Museum, located on Duke Street, is an old slave trading firm's base of operations. Today, it's a museum that honors the lives and experiences of those who lived in and were trafficked through Alexandria. America's skinniest historic home, the Hollinsbury Spite House, is at 523 Queen Street. The private residence was built in 1830 to prevent loiterers and wagons from entering the owner's alley. The house is 7 feet wide and 25 feet deep. There are a variety of dining options on and around King Street. In the pedestrian-friendly 100 block of King Street is Hard Times Cafe, which is known for their different styles of chili served on a bed of spaghetti. Parked in front of the restaurant is a 1941 Chevy pickup truck with a white horse in the bed. Across the street from the King Street Metro station is Theismann's, a restaurant and bar that serves comfort American cuisine. It's named after and was partially founded by Redskins quarterback Joe Theismann. There are multiple places for live music in Alexandria, particularly on King Street. If you're interested in delicious Irish fare, check out Murphy's Grand Irish Pub for nightly Irish and local music. The pub is open from 11 a.m. until 2 a.m. Rocket Grill, a few blocks from the metro station, has nightly karaoke and is open from 11 a.m. until 1:30 a.m. If you have time to wander Alexandria, there are many self-guided walking tours to explore. You can find more information on everything that I've mentioned at alexandriava.gov. Along the Potomac River, 14 miles upstream from Washington, D.C., is the spectacular and extraordinary Great Falls of the Potomac. At Great Falls, water rushes over large, jagged rocks through rapids, cascading into 20-foot water displays, the steepest of any eastern river. The series of fast-flowing falls drop to a total of 76 feet in less than a mile, through a narrow gorge known as Mather Gorge. The sight is dramatic and captivating. Great Falls of the Potomac is an 800 acres National Park Service site that sits on both the Maryland and Virginia sides of the gorge. It is a 20-minute drive from D.C. along the George Washington Memorial Parkway and is part of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, C&O, National Historic Park. It is open from 7 a.m. until dusk. From 1785 to 1802, the Potomac Canal was built along Great Falls to aid in transportation of manufactured goods upstream and raw materials downstream. 5 locks were built to lift and lower barges the 75 feet along the river falls. When hiking today, you can see remnants of the locks, and in the visitor center, there are 2 wooden gates on display. An interesting fact is that the construction of the canal was originally led by George Washington as president of the Potomac Company from 1785 to 1789. Great Falls is a beautiful area to spend a few hours in nature to enjoy the magnificent views and peaceful surrounding woods. There are several picnic tables and grills available. There is also a concession stand that operates from May through October. Great Falls has many trail options. The River Trail on the Virginia side and close to the Great Falls Tavern Visitor Center is the most popular. It is 4.6 miles and runs along the rocky edge of Mather Gorge. The Maryland side has the Billy Goat Trails. This trail system contains 3 sections that total 8 miles. Section A is the most difficult and requires some near vertical rock scrambling, while Section C is the easiest. In addition, the park includes trails for biking and horseback riding. There's also rock climbing available. The National Park System's website has more information, and it's best to verify the current trail conditions. The Great Falls Tavern Visitor Center's parking lot requires an entrance fee of $20 per car. Free parking is available for the Billy Goat Trails at Carter Rock. There are no campgrounds available at Great Falls Park, but there are options in the area. Taking it back to the heart of Washington, D.C., we travel to Ford's Theater, known as the site of the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. 2 years after Ford's Theater was built, the fateful night of April 14, 1865, a Good Friday, Abraham and Mary Lincoln attended the performance of Our American Cousin. The 16th president was shot in the head in his theater box and later died the next morning at the Peterson House across the street. The assassin was John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor of the time and Confederate sympathizer. Ford's Theater is a National Historic Site managed by the National Park System and in partnership with the Ford's Theater Society. Ford's Theater is still a working theater that includes a museum in the basement that is dedicated to the assassination and features exhibits detailing the aftermath. Tickets to tour the theater and museum in Peterson House are free the day of your visit, but reservations are recommended and cost $3.50 online. Some of the artifacts to view at the museum are the .44 caliber pistol that killed Lincoln, the knife that Booth used to stab Major Henry Rathbone, and Lincoln's blood-stained pillow. There is also an incredible 34-foot Tower of Lincoln books that represents the over 15,000 book titles written about the beloved president. If you are interested in seeing a production in the historic theater, check out Fords.org. Ford's Theater is about a 5 to 10 minute walk from both the National Mall and the White House. There are metro and bus stops nearby. The following are a couple honorable mentions. Next to the Capitol building is the United States Botanic Garden, a living museum dedicated to conservation and research. The Botanic Garden possesses rare and endangered plants, like the Venus flytrap and the corpse flower that blooms for 2 to 3 days every year or two. The garden displays hundreds of its roughly 5,000 orchids. In the outdoor gardens is home to the historic Fountain of Light and Water, designed by French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Pintard, the same person who created the Statue of Liberty. Cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. bloom in late March or sometimes in early April. The Yoshino cherry blossoms are the most famous variety around the tidal basin. However, some of the existing trees will be replaced during a 3-year project to restore the seawalls. Japan will gift the United States 250 cherry blossoms to replace some of what will be lost. At Haines Point, there are thousands of cherry trees to view from 11 species to include the double-blossomed kawazans. The park also features magnolia blossoms. Haines Point has plenty of parking as of recent years. The remaining are additional sites worth looking into. The Smithsonian's National Zoo and nearby Rock Creek National Park. The Smithsonian museums around the National Mall, some of which include the Natural History Museum, National Museum of American History, and the National Air and Space Museum, which has the largest collection of notable air and spaceships in the world. Georgetown, D.C.'s oldest city that was established in 1789. Ben's Chili Bowl, a landmark restaurant on U Street. Ethnic food in the Adams Morgan district, specifically Ethiopian. Regional biking trails to include the Washington and Old Dominion Railroad Regional Park, the C&O National Historic Park, and the Capitol Crescent Trail. Some more additional sites are Fort Washington National Park, Washington National Cathedral, National Archives, National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial, the Soldiers' Home, President Lincoln's Cottage, National Harbor, Embassy Row, Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. I hope you get the opportunity to tour Washington, D.C. soon. There are too many sightseeing options in the nation's capital, so it's best to rank your list and be realistic on what you have time to visit when planning. Don't get upset if you begin feeling overwhelmed, and keep in mind you can always return. If you have experience or insight into any of these destinations, please share in the comments section. This information is written in my Washington, D.C. blog at travelguidesfromkris.com. The link is in this video's description. Please consider supporting this channel by subscribing. Turn on the notification bell if you want alerted when new travel content is published. Thank you for watching. Happy planning!